Counselor Mark Richards, attorney for Kyle Rittenhouse, helped make that call. Counselor, appreciate you taking the opportunity.
Good evening.
How difficult a call was it?
You know, myself and Corey Shirafisi went round and around with it. We felt as though we had a witness, a client who could tell his story. He was articulate, fairly intelligent. He didn't have any damage. He didn't have prior convictions or never been in trouble. He was a police cadet, fire cadet, pro-social. We thought he could do it. There was obviously a lot of work that went into it. We did a mock jury, and the mock jury where the 12 people did not hear Kyle's story. He scored much worse than the people who did hear his story. And that was subject to cross-examination by a trained ex-prosecutor. And that made the decision, I don't want to say easy, but it made it the right call. And in Wisconsin, when you have to put yourself in the feet or the shoes of that person, he needs to tell his story. And we felt strongly about that from the beginning. From the first time I met Kyle Rittenhouse when he was in custody in the McHenry County Detention Center, I talked to him about that, and he was willing to do that and wanted to.
Does he wish he hadn't gone that night? Does he think he did anything wrong?
100 times over. I've had talks, Kyle said if I had to do it all over again and had any idea something like this could happen, I wouldn't do it. And that is not, I want to be clear, that is not regret for what he did that night under those circumstances. Hindsight is always 20/20, if not better. And he didn't want to kill anybody. And he was left with a terrible choice, and he exercised that choice, which was found to be lawful.
Does he think he did anything wrong?
Legally, no.
Morally?
He wishes he didn't have to do it. But, this case, as you said, has been so political. So yes or no. The narrative that came out was not the truth. At trial, it did come out. He had lived in that community. He had worked in that community. His family, his dad, his grandmother, aunts, uncles lived in that community. He spent a lot of time there. He went down there earlier in the day to help clean up graffiti, do those things. And when he was asked to help out at Car Source, he went. And, so much was made that he wasn't an EMT. He did help people there. Nobody was harmed by Kyle Rittenhouse putting bandages or gauze on, and he went around seeking to help people. They wanted to portray him as a liar and fireman wannabe. I don't think that's what it was. But that was the narrative they needed to put forth to try and get a conviction on Kyle Rittenhouse.
Does he have concerns that maybe he could have done something else? Maybe he didn't have to fire. Maybe he could have fought. Maybe he could have gotten back on his feet. Does he ask himself those questions?
I don't. As to Mr. Rosenbaum, and that was really the count that I think set up this whole case. I told a story earlier, and it's 100% true. The first time I met Kyle, I asked him about Rittenhouse. I hadn't seen that video. And I asked him how big Rosenbaum was. And he said to me, he was over 6 feet and 250 pounds. Obviously, that was wrong.
Yep.
That was his perception as this individual who was throwing this bag, who he'd seen earlier in the evening, was coming at him. And, he had one, as I said, he had no duty to retreat. But two, Mr. Rosenbaum could have stopped at any time and none of this would have happened. His judgment in running after a person, as he yelled on the tape, and it was clearly visible, you aren't going to do SMFer. And he believed Kyle didn't have the guts to do it. He was wrong, and he paid with his life.
Well, I don't know that it's guts. I think it's bad judgment. It was justified under the law, but I think it's hard, and that's why I asked the question. It's hard to believe that somebody chasing you is going to beat you to death.
Why else was he chasing him, Chris?
Probably to get him and beat him up, hurt him. But again, my problem is with the law here.
Okay.
Look, we don't know what he was going to do. All we know now, we do, because now we know that none of the people involved here ever killed anybody before or are known for that kind of violence. But he didn't know that in the moment. This law, does it concern you how low a bar this law presents for now some 10 years, that there's no duty to retreat, that you put yourself in his shoes, not the reasonable person's shoes, that the prosecutor has to prove self-defense wasn't necessary by a reasonable doubt, unlike so many other state statutes? You worried about this being too low a bar?
You know, I don't think anybody with a brain is going to go out and say, I'm going to go kill somebody and see if I can get away with it in self-defense. I've done a lot of self-defense cases in Wisconsin over the years where it was claimed and hasn't been successful. And Kyle Rittenhouse is thankful that this was on videotape because it showed this individual's true intent throughout the evening. And, you know, if it was his word against the mob, he would have came in second.
They're really showing themselves to do really well. Come on, man.